Hey everyone, we've built something optimistic and beautiful on Royal Road. It's absolutely free, so go check it out. The link is in the description. Picture a world where a top-tier university student suddenly loses half their IQ the moment they walk into a physical classroom. Or a reality where renting a house makes perfect financial sense. But hoarding the digital weights of a supercomputer model is the only true wealth. We are standing on the precipice of June 2026, and the ground is shifting so fast beneath our feet that even the world's top dockers are being overruled by chatbots. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
It really is a wild time to be alive, honestly.
It really is. Today, we are unpacking a high-velocity intelligence briefing from Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross, dated June 29th, 2026. Our goal is to connect the dots between exponential AI breakthroughs, the scramble for physical compute power, and the total rewiring of human labor and culture to help you navigate this massive societal shift.
Yeah, in this briefing, it's a dizzying snapshot of this exact moment in time. Looking at the sheer density of information dropping in late June of 2026, you realize we've completely crossed over. We're not anticipating a futuristic paradigm anymore. We're just, scrambling to adapt to the one deploying in real time.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the scramble, we really have to look at how the actual calendar of human progress has been hijacked. It used to be that the tech industry had these very predictable seasonal rhythms.
Oh, totally. The fall keynotes, the summer software conferences.
Exactly. You could plan your entire fiscal year around them. But now the singularity itself is essentially setting the release calendar. The frontier AI models are advancing so aggressively that they're dictating the cadence of the entire global economy.
That cadence is compounding in ways that just completely break traditional product cycles. I mean, take a look at what's happening at Elon Musk's XAI. Musk just announced that Grok version 9 is a solid workhorse that operates in the exact same league as Anthropic's Opus model.
Which is wild.
Right. And to grasp how absurd that is, we need to trace Grok's lineage back just 6 months. Back in December, they finished training the version 8 foundation, which was basically Grok 4.3. That was a 500 billion parameter model, a 0.5T model.
6 months ago. That's what totally blows my mind. You go from a 500 billion parameter model in December, and now we're looking at a massive 2 trillion parameter training run, a 2T run dropping in August. That's a quadrupling of structural scale in less than a year.
It's unprecedented scaling.
But it's not just throwing more hardware at the wall, is it? Because the briefing mentions they're also folding Cursor's data and our engineering team quietly into version 9 right before this big run.
Exactly, yeah. And that integration is far more strategic than just a standard corporate acquisition. Cursor isn't just an app. It's a deeply embedded AI coding environment. It sits right where human developers do their most complex reasoning.
So they have a front row seat to how programmers actually think.
Precisely. By folding Cursor's proprietary data into Grok v9, XAI isn't just trying to make a chatbot that knows trivia. They are feeding the model the highest quality sequential logic data available. The actual keystrokes, the debugging processes, and the architectural decisions of top-tier software engineers.
Wow. So they're essentially baking the DNA of elite human programmers directly into the model's fundamental reasoning engine.
That's the mechanism, yeah. Language models improve their general reasoning dramatically when they learn to code, because code is pure, unforgiving logic.
It either works or it doesn't.
Right. It either compiles or it crashes. If you quadruple the size of the neural network from 0.5T to 2T, and you simultaneously inject it with an ocean of flawless engineering data, you're engineering a massive leap in its ability to parse complex multi-step problems across any domain.
Which explains why everyone is moving at this breakneck paranoid speed. But this ecosystem isn't a set of perfectly sealed corporate vaults. The briefing makes it clear that it's wildly messy. The ecosystem is basically leaky.
Oh, incredibly leaky.
Yeah, there was this wild story about sleuths online who managed to fingerprint a Grayscale GBT 5.6 sol model that was secretly hiding inside OpenAI's codex. And they caught it by measuring its juice value.
I absolutely love this development because it highlights the cat and mouse game between massive AI labs and the developer community. Let's look at the mechanics of what a Grayscale model actually is.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So it's essentially an unannounced intermediary version of an AI. The lab hasn't released a press statement. They haven't given it a public name, but they've quietly slotted it into the back end of an existing product, in this case, Codex, to shadow test its capabilities in the real world.
Okay, so to the listener, have you ever noticed an app on your phone silently getting an upgrade behind the scenes? Like overnight, the search function just magically understands your weird phrasing better.
Right, A/B testing on a massive scale.
Exactly. That's what's happening here. But instead of a minor UI tweak, developers were interacting with next-generation intelligence without realizing it. But I've been trying to wrap my head around this juice metric. If I'm just typing code, how on earth do I detect that a secret AI is running the autocomplete? It feels like trying to guess if you're playing against a chess grandmaster who's using a fake account online.
That's a brilliant analogy, actually. If you're a decent chess player playing against a grandmaster on a Smurf account, you wouldn't just look at whether they win or lose. You'd look at the complexity of their moves.
You'd see them setting traps 10 moves ahead.
Exactly. You'd notice them making sacrifices or structural plays that a mid-level player simply wouldn't conceptualize. In the AI world, sleuths do something similar using statistical analysis. Every AI model has a specific probability distribution for how it selects tokens, which are basically fragments of words or code.
So it's like a digital fingerprint.
Precisely. The juice value is colloquial slang for a metric that measures the reasoning density or the entropy of the output. When these sleuths analyzed the code coming out of Codex, they noticed the token distribution was suddenly exhibiting a level of structural foresight and syntactic complexity that completely defied the known boundaries of GPT-4.
Oh, wow.
The model was making grandmaster moves. That statistical leap was the smoking gun that OpenAI had quietly deployed a heavier weight class model, likely a variant of 5.6, into the wild.
And catching them red-handed like this just ramps up the global tension. We're hearing rumors that Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 might actually clear for public release next week. But the really fascinating part isn't just the release itself, it's the timing. The delay leading up to this release has apparently starved overseas rival labs of a month of distillation.
And we really cannot overstate the macroeconomic impact of that phrase, a month of distillation. Distillation is the engine of the catch-up game.
How so?
Well, when a massive state-of-the-art frontier model is released, competitors immediately use it as a synthetic teacher. They feed it incredibly complex problems, take its brilliant outputs, and use that high-quality data to train their own smaller, cheaper, faster models. They distill the genius of the massive model into their own systems.
Right. It's like taking a masterpiece painting and using it to trace a million perfect copies so your students can learn the brushstrokes.
Yes, but imagine if the master painter locks the studio door for a month. In a traditional industry, a 30-day delay in getting competitive data is, an annoyance. In the exponential curve of AI development in 2026, a 1-month delay is a catastrophic loss of compounding progress.
Because everyone else is moving so fast.
Right. While overseas labs are sitting idle, waiting for the new API to drop so they can distill it, the creators of GPT 5.6 are already using that model internally to generate the training data for GPT-6. That 30-day window is an existential gap.
Which completely explains the absolute paranoia sweeping through Silicon Valley right now. Because if you know your competitors are waiting to distill your data, you start viewing every interaction as a potential leak. Look at Meta. They are so paranoid about their engineers using Anthropic's Claude code and OpenAI's Codex that they are actively capping their usage while they scramble to build their own internal tool, Metacode.
The irony is striking, isn't it? These coding agents make software engineers exponentially more productive. Yet Meta is intentionally handicapping its own workforce to protect its intellectual property.
It feels exactly like a clean room protocol in a high-security biolab. They are terrified of cross-contamination. They don't want the digital DNA of OpenAI or Anthropic getting baked into Metacode's proprietary soup.
That's exactly the mechanism at play.
Yeah.
Language models learn from whatever you feed them. If Meta's engineers are writing thousands of lines of software using Claude, and then Meta scoops up all that internal code to train Metacode, they've inadvertently ingested Anthropic's proprietary logic patterns.
They've poisoned their own well.
Exactly. If Anthropic ever audited Metacode's outputs and proved that it statistically resembled Claude's unique token distribution, its juice Meta could face astronomical legal liabilities for IP theft. So the data itself becomes toxic if it originated from a rival's model.
Okay, so let's follow that thread. If a single mega corporation like Meta is putting up biolab-style walls, capping APIs, and locking down internal data just to survive, What happens when entire nations start feeling that exact same paranoia? If the digital frontier is leaky and IP is constantly being stolen through distillation, the natural evolution of this is massive geopolitical walled gardens.
That is the inevitable phase transition we are witnessing. We are moving from corporate IP defense to national sovereign security. The arrival of GLM 5.2 is the perfect catalyst for this.
Yeah, GLM 5.2 is being called the open source Claude moment. Ethan Mollick, who tracks these benchmarks religiously, showed that the frontier curve isn't just climbing, it's flattening globally. His data shows there is now only a 3-month lag between the best American open models and the best Chinese open models. Just 3 months.
And I want to push back on the idea that a 3-month lag provides any sort of comfort to Western policymakers, because structurally it doesn't. When we're dealing with exponential technologies, a 3-month gap is effectively statistical noise.
It's nothing.
It means that any theoretical breakthrough in model architecture, any optimization in matrix multiplication, or any novel synthetic data generation technique developed in San Francisco is being independently replicated, reverse engineered, or directly distilled in Beijing within a single business quarter.
And because these are open source models, once they hit GitHub or Hugging Face, the proliferation is instantaneous. It's not like trying to smuggle a physical fighter jet blueprint out of a base. It's a weight file you can download over a coffee shop Wi-Fi network.
Which brings us to the core of Xiaoyin Kui's warning. She's a former Meta product manager, and she outlines what she views as the ultimate strategic nightmare for the U.S. It's not just about who has the most articulate chatbot. The nightmare is Beijing achieving total vertical integration.
Meaning owning the whole stack.
Right. Owning the foundational model, owning the domestic silicon to train it, and owning the inference layers to deploy it, all concurrently.
And she's arguing that traditional export controls, the politicians banging their fists on the table saying just ban the sale of chips, are completely useless. Her solution is incredibly aggressive. She says the U.S. needs to heavily subsidize open source to maintain dominance, lure these models specifically onto NVIDIA's SUDA software platform to maintain ecosystem lock-in, and, quote, build nuclear immediately.
Her analysis of export controls is structurally sound. Export controls act like a leaky dam. They increase the friction and cost for arrival, but water eventually finds a way around. If you deny a nation access to top-tier hardware, you simply force them to hyper-optimize their software to run on legacy chips, which actually accelerates their independence.
Okay, but I have to stop you there. Build nuclear immediately. Is this technology really demanding a Manhattan Project level response? I mean, I get that data centers take power, but this sounds like classic Silicon Valley panic. Are tech leaders just projecting their own corporate anxieties onto the global geopolitical stage?
It's a vital question. It's easy to dismiss it as hyperbole, but let's look at the actual physics and economics of a 2 trillion parameter training run. You are talking about hundreds of thousands of GPUs running continuously for months. The limiting factor for AI progress in 2026 is no longer algorithmic ingenuity. It is raw, unadulterated baseload power.
And regular grids can't handle it?
Not at all. Wind and solar are too intermittent. Natural gas has supply chain and carbon constraints. If you want to maintain a multi-generational lead in artificial intelligence, you require gigawatt-scale, uninterrupted power. So while immediately sounds panicked, the underlying engineering reality is that sovereign AI supremacy is fundamentally a nuclear energy problem.
And that realization is turning sovereignty into an actual physical product you can buy off a shelf. Palantir and NVIDIA are literally teaming up to ship an engine that runs Nemotron open models in air-gapped classified environments. So what does this all mean for the cloud?
This is a fascinating architectural pivot. For the last decade, the entire tech industry moved to the cloud. Everything was centralized in massive remote server farms. But when you are dealing with top-tier military intelligence or proprietary national data, sending your prompts over an internet connection to an OpenAI data center is a non-starter.
Right, because even if the connection is encrypted, you don't control the physical machine at the other end. So what does a Palantir NVIDIA air-gapped system actually look like mechanically?
Mechanically, it looks like a ruggedized, highly dense server rack that you can physically roll into a subterranean military bunker. An air-gapped environment literally means there is a gap of air between the computer and any outside network. You unplug the Ethernet cables, you rip out the Wi-Fi cards.
That's totally isolated.
Exactly. What Palantir and NVIDIA have achieved is compressing the immense computational power required to run a frontier inference model like Nemotron into a localized hardware box.
So an intelligence agency can load their classified documents into the box, ask the AI to find patterns in enemy troop movements, and generate strategic reports, and none of that data ever leaves the room. The model weights stay entirely in-house.
Precisely. Sovereignty in 2026 isn't just a political concept. It is a physical box of silicon that you guard with men carrying rifles.
And it's not just the military that's terrified of losing access. It's entire foreign governments. Look at Austria. They are actively lobbying the European Union to physically host Anthropic inside the European bloc. And the reason why is while a U.S. directive recently cut foreigners off from Anthropic's best models.
This perfectly illustrates the fragility of relying on foreign cognitive infrastructure. When a U.S. directive can effectively lobotomize a European nation's digital workforce overnight simply by revoking API access, the illusion of a borderless internet shatters. AI is no longer just software. It is utility-scale cognitive infrastructure.
It's like waking up and realizing a foreign president has the switch to turn off your country's electricity. Austria's panic makes total sense. They're essentially saying, we need to legally kidnap Anthropic and chain their servers to European soil under European jurisdiction so Washington can't unplug our economy.
It is the balkanization of artificial intelligence. Nations are realizing that if the intelligence doesn't physically reside within their borders, subject to their local laws, they're functioning as a digital colony.
And meanwhile, back in the U.S., local politicians are trying to mandate that this technology gets embedded into the government as fast as possible. California Governor Gavin Newsom is handing every single state agency access to Claude at a 50% discount, and he's subsidizing the workforce training to go with it.
Let's analyze the mechanics of that policy, strictly from a structural deployment perspective. By leveraging the state's massive purchasing power to secure a 50% discount and covering the training costs, Governor Newsom is artificially removing the two biggest hurdles to enterprise AI adoption cost and competence. This acts as a massive forced modernization program for California's bureaucracy.
Right. The goal is presumably to make the DMV or the housing department vastly more efficient. But it also deeply entrenches Anthropic into the state's operations. Once every state employee is trained on Claude and every legacy database is structured to be read by Claude, ripping that system out in 5 years would be administratively impossible. It's a brilliant vendor lock-in play by Anthropic.
It is, and it contrasts sharply with what's happening at the federal regulatory level. Senator Mark Warner has a draft bill that approaches this from a completely different angle. He's proposing a duty of loyalty on services like OpenClaw and trying to prevent dominant platforms from throttling their rivals.
The duty of loyalty concept is fascinating. From a legal standpoint, fiduciary duty usually applies to your lawyer or your financial advisor. They are legally obligated to act in your best financial interest, even if it hurts their own firm. But applying that to an AI agent...
It is a radical expansion of liability. Let's trace how this mechanically works. Say you use an AI agent to book a flight and a hotel for a business trip. Historically, if you use a search engine, that engine will show you sponsored results first because the airline paid for placement. The platform optimizes for its own ad revenue.
Sure.
Warner's bill argues that if an AI agent is acting as your personal proxy, it cannot secretly prioritize an airline just because that airline paid the AI's parent company a kickback.
So if it knows I hate early morning flights, and the cheapest afternoon flight is on an airline that didn't pay for ads, the AI is legally required to book that one. It has to optimize for me.
Correct. It attempts to legally sever the AI's loyalty to its corporate creator and bind it to the end user. And the anti-throttling provision addresses the walled garden dynamics we discussed earlier. If you build an incredible new AI agent, but Apple or Google decide to artificially slow down its processing speed on their operating systems to make their own internal AI look better, Warner's bill would make that illegal.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to maintain a neutral physical infrastructure for competing cognitive layers.
But here is where all of these grand geopolitical strategies, the regulations, the air-gapped bunkers, and the API caps violently crash into a wall of pure physics. You can write the tightest regulations in the world. You can design a brilliant multi-trillion parameter architecture. But at the end of the day, intelligence requires physical extraction. It runs on atoms.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the great illusion of the last 20 years was that the digital economy was weightless. The cloud sounds ethereal and infinite. But the physical reality of 2026 is that the digital superstructure is arguably the heaviest, most resource-intensive industrial project in human history.
And the supply chains are literally buckling. Let's look at the memory market. Ming-Chi Kuo, who is arguably the most plugged-in supply chain analyst on Earth, is projecting that the memory gap will widen through 2027. Why? Because massive AI data centers are devouring the entire consumer supply. It's gotten so bad that Apple is secretly lobbying Washington to keep China's CXMT off the entity list, just so they can buy enough memory chips for iPhones.
The mechanics of this shortage are deeply rooted in semiconductor manufacturing. AI models require high bandwidth memory, or HBM. To process a trillion parameters, the GPU needs to access data almost instantaneously. HBM achieves this by physically stacking memory chips on top of each other and connecting them with microscopic vertical wires.
It's like a city realizing all its drinking water is being diverted to a massive new factory upstream. Data centers are literally drinking the consumer supply, forcing Apple to play geopolitical chess with China's CXMT. I think of the memory architecture itself like upgrading a 2-lane highway to a 20-lane superhighway. If the GPU is the city center, HBM ensures thousands of cars can enter and exit simultaneously without a traffic jam.
That's a perfect visualization. But manufacturing that 20-lane superhighway is incredibly complex, highly prone to defects, and takes months on a fabrication line. Because data center giants like Microsoft and Meta are willing to pay massive premiums to secure every single HBM wafer TSMC can produce, the memory manufacturers naturally prioritize them.
Which means they stop making the cheap, standard memory chips that go into regular laptops, TVs, and smartphones.
Exactly. The manufacturing capacity is finite. By pivoting to high-margin AI memory, they starve the consumer electronics sector. Apple's situation is the ultimate irony. They are arguably the most powerful consumer hardware company in history, and they are being squeezed out of the market by data centers.
Which is insane to think about.
Apple lobbying to keep China's CXMT chips and memory technologies off the U.S. restricted list is a desperate geopolitical maneuver. They need a secondary, high-volume supplier of legacy memory because all the premium foundries are exclusively serving the AI behemoths.
So, to you listening, consider your next smartphone or laptop purchase. If the data centers are eating all the memory, how long until your everyday devices get noticeably more expensive or harder to find? We're going to feel this. We're going to wonder why a standard machine suddenly costs 30% more, or why it's backordered for 3 months.
And nations are deploying capital on a scale we haven't seen since the space race to try and fix this physical bottleneck. The briefing highlights South Korea. They are building a $585 billion semiconductor mega-complex. $500 billion for a single industrial project.
Let's put that in perspective. The entire Apollo program that put humans on the moon, adjusted for inflation, was roughly $250 to $300 billion. South Korea is spending double the Apollo program just to build a cluster of silicon factories. It's a total reimagining of their sovereign economy.
And the terrifying math is that even a $585 billion mega-complex might barely move the needle. Josh Yu over at APOC tracks global compute capacity, and his findings are staggering. At the end of 2025, the top 5 AI labs utilized just under half of the entire world's available AI compute.
Wow.
But because of the exponential scaling laws, where each new frontier model requires roughly an order of magnitude more compute than the last, he projects that Anthropic and OpenAI alone could swallow the entire remaining global headroom within a few years.
Wait, hold on. That doesn't fully make sense. If they're building more fabs, shouldn't capacity be going up?
Capacity is increasing, but demand is compounding exponentially. If you double the global supply of chips, but the next training run requires 10 times the hardware, your surplus evaporates instantly. The current surplus of compute is a mirage. It's merely the runway being laid for the impending 2027 multi-trillion parameter training runs. 2 companies are effectively on track to consume the absolute maximum amount of computational hardware available on planet Earth.
Which forces these companies to scour the globe for stranded energy. Because you can't just plug 1 million GPUs into the grid in California, you'll black out the state. This brings us to Indonesia. Firmus and Daewon are currently building a 360-megawatt NVIDIA campus in Indonesia, backed by a staggering $30 billion offtake deal.
Let's unpack the sheer physics of 360 megawatts. That is not a data center. That is the energy consumption of a mid-sized industrial city running 24/7, concentrated into a few heavily fortified buildings.
And an offtake deal basically means the buyers have contractually guaranteed they will purchase $30 billion worth of compute power before the concrete is even poured, right?
Exactly. It de-risks the massive upfront capital expenditure. But the choice of Indonesia is driven by physical constraints. You need access to immense, relatively cheap baseload power. And perhaps more importantly, you need access to colossal amounts of water for cooling.
Which perfectly sets up the darkest, funniest piece of cultural commentary in the whole briefing. Polaroid, the vintage camera company that deals in physical, chemical, film, bought a billboard to troll the tech industry. It literally read, "Jump in the water before the data centers drink it."
It's brilliant marketing because it highlights the often ignored thermodynamic reality of computation. A server farm is essentially a massive electric heater that occasionally does math. When you pack hundreds of thousands of HBM-equipped GPUs into a tight physical space, they generate enough thermal energy to melt themselves into slag. To prevent catastrophic failure, facilities pump millions of gallons of water through evaporative cooling towers every single day.
So in areas where water is already scarce, you have local municipalities fighting tech giants over whether the water goes to agriculture and human consumption or to cooling the machines training GPT-6. Polaroid is laughing at the absurdity of it, but it's a very real physical limit.
It is the ultimate collision between the synthetic and the biological.
Which leads us to the most visceral part of this transition. If all of the world's physical resources are being poured into these models, the inevitable result is a total reorganization of what humans actually do all day. Work is being rewired.
The briefing features an incredibly provocative framework from Boris Cherny, the creator of Claude Code. He argues that traditional, hierarchical job titles, software engineer, product manager, UX designer, are rapidly dissolving. In their place, human labor is self-organizing into 5 distinct functional archetypes: the prototyper, the builder, the sweeper, the grower, and the maintainer.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I've been thinking about these archetypes all week, and honestly, I want to push back on the idea that this is some kind of egalitarian evolution. Does getting rid of job titles actually empower workers, or does it just turn everyone into a gig worker for an algorithm? I mean, let's role play this. Say you're the prototyper.
Okay, if I am the prototyper, my role is entirely generative. I am rapidly prompting frontier models to hallucinate hundreds of initial concepts, architectures, or designs within an hour. I don't write the underlying code. I act as the imaginative catalyst for the machine.
Okay, so you generate the idea and then I'm the builder. But I'm not building it with my hands. I'm just overseeing an armada of AI agents as they assemble your concept into a functional product. But here's the architect that sounds like absolute hell, the sweeper. If I'm the sweeper, aren't I just the digital janitor?
The sweeper is perhaps the most psychologically taxing archetype. As the sweeper, your entire existence is relegated to edge cases. AI is notoriously bad at the final 5% of a complex task. The unpredictable bugs, the bizarre hallucinations, the legacy system integrations. The sweeper is the human assigned to manually clean up the microscopic, infuriating errors the AI leaves behind.
So you never get the joy of creating the product. You just endlessly fix the machine's mistakes. And then the grower scales the infrastructure and the maintainer makes sure the old stuff doesn't catch fire. It completely flattens human ambition. It removes the vertical ladder where you start as a junior, learn the craft, and become a senior architect. It replaces it with horizontal silos where your only manager is the API limits of the model.
And we are already seeing the economic devastation of this flattening in the professional services sector. The briefing cites a leaked Deloitte town hall projection indicating that human consultant billing will shrink to a sliver by 2035 as AI agents absorb the majority of the analytical work.
Think about the business model of a massive consultancy like Deloitte. They charge a fortune by throwing armies of 24-year-old junior analysts at a problem. Those analysts live in Excel, crunch data, and build slide decks. If an AI agent can synthesize a company's entire financial history and generate a flawless strategic report in 40 seconds for $2, the entire pyramid scheme of consulting collapses.
That collapse is already visible in the macroeconomic data. Eric Brynjolfsson's Canary's dashboard, which tracks real-time employment metrics across 4.6 million workers, reveals a persistent structural 13% hit to entry-level employment for 22 to 25-year-olds. And Brynjolfsson states unequivocally that this hit isn't going away. It is the canary in the coal mine.
Because if you think about it mechanically, how is human expertise generated? I wasn't born knowing how to do this deep dive. I learned by doing terrible junior-level work for years. A senior developer becomes senior by spending their 20s writing basic, tedious boilerplate code. That is the traditional ladder of apprenticeship.
Precisely. And AI is extraordinarily proficient at executing routine, entry-level cognitive tasks. By deploying AI to optimize short-term efficiency, corporations are mechanically sawing off the bottom rung of the apprenticeship ladder, leaving a massive skills gap for the future.
So we have to ask the obvious question. If the 22-year-olds can't get jobs doing the basic grunt work because the AI is infinitely cheaper, how do they ever become the 35-year-old senior experts? Where does the next generation of human oversight come from?
That is a structural crisis that free market economics is currently failing to price in. We are burning our seed corn. In a decade, these companies will be running unimaginably complex, multi-trillion parameter systems that require deep, nuanced human intuition to manage safely. But they won't have a talent pool to draw from because they refuse to subsidize the decade of learning required to build that intuition.
And this hollowing out isn't just hitting spreadsheets and code, it's aggressively synthesizing culture. Look at the animation industry. The briefing details a studio planning a full-feature film utilizing just 40 animators for a total budget of around $15 million. Traditionally, a film of that scale would require hundreds of highly specialized artists and cost between $100 and $200 million.
The deflationary shock to creative economics is unprecedented. Animation is a highly specialized, labor-intensive process framing, lighting, rendering, in-betweening. Generative AI fundamentally commoditizes the execution phase of creativity.
Right.
If a director can use a model to instantly render complex lighting topologies or generate thousands of background assets, they no longer need the army of mid-level artists.
But it's causing massive ideological friction. The briefing mentions a filmmaker who explicitly quit an Amazon AI project in protest. It's a revolt by the creative class who see this not as a tool, but as a mechanism designed to devalue human artistry.
We are witnessing a bifurcation of the creative industry. One faction views AI as the ultimate leverage, allowing a visionary with a small team to execute billion-dollar ideas. The opposing faction views it as a dystopian theft of human expression, a machine that plagiarizes emotion without experiencing it.
And it gets incredibly visceral when it invades your personal social media. The briefing highlights that Instagram is currently testing systems that aim ads built from your profile picture directly at your friends. It brings the impact of AI directly to your social feed.
Let's examine the psychological mechanics of that strategy. Marketing has always relied on the concept of social proof. You are more likely to buy a product if a trusted peer endorses it. Historically, brands paid influencers for this. Instagram's AI bypasses the influencer entirely.
It's weaponized social engineering. Imagine you're scrolling through your feed and you see an ad for a new pair of running shoes. But the model wearing the shoes isn't a celebrity, it's your best friend. The AI scraped their public profile picture, mapped their face onto a synthetic, photorealistic 3D body, adjusted the lighting to look like a candid photo, and served it to you because its relationship graph knows you trust this person's taste.
It is incredibly effective, but it operates in a moral and legal gray area regarding digital identity and consent. It blurs the line between reality and synthetic marketing so seamlessly that the user's critical defense mechanisms are entirely bypassed.
And the sheer velocity at which this synthesis occurs makes it impossible to regulate. GPT 5.6 Pro generated a functionally complete, legally distinct Pokemon clone in 31 minutes from a single prompt. 31 minutes.
The mechanism of legally distinct is the terrifying part. To generate a video game in half an hour is a staggering technical feat of coding and asset generation. But to do it in a way that perfectly captures the aesthetic, mechanical, and psychological appeal of a globally recognized franchise without violating copyright law requires the AI to possess a nuanced understanding of human legal thresholds. It understands exactly how close it can get to the line without crossing it.
When a machine can build a Pokemon clone in half an hour or replace an entire animation studio, authenticity suddenly becomes the most precious commodity on Earth.
This raises an important question. How does society measure human competence when every individual is augmented by a pocket-sized superintelligence?
The Brown University data perfectly illustrates this disaster. We have East Asian students caught using AI smart glasses to cheat on exams, but a professor at Brown ran the numbers and discovered at least 50 students whose take-home exam average was a stellar 96. But when he forced them to take an in-person, proctored, analog final exam, their average cratered to a 48.
A drop from a 96 to a 48 is not a variance in test anxiety. It is a systemic failure of knowledge transfer. It proves that the students were not cognitively engaging with the material, they were functioning as mere biological conduits, physically copying the outputs generated by Claude or GPT.
They were just meat puppets for the algorithm. But think about the broader implications for remote work. If we can't trust that a college student actually knows the math on a take-home test, how do we trust that a remote employee actually possesses the skills we are paying them for?
We can't. And this forces a massive structural reversion. For the past 20 years, the trend in both academia and corporate life has been toward flexibility, remote assessment, and open book evaluation. But when digital verification is entirely compromised by hypercompetent AI, the only way to establish authentic human baseline competence is a return to highly controlled, isolated physical environments. The analog exam room becomes the only trusted proving ground.
It's not just testing human competence, it's testing human truth. There's a deeply relatable story in the briefing about a blogger who suffered a torn tendon. He went to his human doctor, got a diagnosis, and then went home and ran his symptoms through Claude Opus 4.8.
A very natural impulse.
Right, you double-check online. But the AI confidently contradicted the doctor, and the blogger realized he was in a state of total paralysis. He didn't know who to believe, which is an epistemological crisis.
Let's look at the mechanics of why that paralysis occurs. A human physician is operating under extreme time constraints, relying on their biological memory and perhaps a quick chart review. Claude Opus, on the other hand, instantly cross-references the patient's symptoms against the entirety of digitized medical literature and presents a deeply patient, highly articulate, logically structured argument.
So naturally, the human instinct is to trust the entity that provides the most comprehensive and comforting explanation.
Exactly. But the danger is that the AI has no physical context. It cannot palpate the tendon. It cannot observe the patient's gait. It can confidently construct a perfectly rational-sounding conclusion that is medically disastrous because it lacks the physical grounding of a human practitioner. We are losing our ability to anchor truth to physical reality.
And you see industries frantically trying to re-anchor that truth with money. Look at the music industry. Tidal announced they are aggressively tagging any song that is fully AI-generated from mid-July onwards, and they are intentionally cutting the royalty payouts for those tracks.
It is a market-driven attempt to construct a protective moat around human authenticity. If generative models can instantly produce 10,000 perfectly mixed tracks a day at zero marginal cost, human musicians will be economically suffocated by an avalanche of infinite supply.
Right. If supply goes to infinity, the price goes to zero. Tidal is basically saying we refuse to let human art go to zero. We are artificially enforcing a premium on blood, sweat, and tears. But mechanically, how do you even enforce that? If an AI song sounds exactly like a human song, do we need some kind of biological DRM?
That is the fatal flaw in their strategy. As the models improve, the acoustic distinction between human and synthetic generation will vanish entirely. Unless platforms force creators to live stream their physical recording sessions as proof of labor, a bifurcated royalty system based purely on audio analysis will eventually fail.
All of this, the collapse of traditional career ladders, the loss of verifiable truth, the geopolitical scrambling for power, it is totally rewiring what the market considers valuable. The macroeconomic landscape is experiencing a massive repricing of assets. The briefing points out a bizarre move. Rocket Lab is buying Iridium for roughly $8 billion to own the entire space stack.
Let's connect that back to our discussion on sovereign infrastructure. Why would a rocket launch company buy a legacy satellite communications network? Because in this new era, relying on third-party infrastructure is a fatal vulnerability.
It's Zhao Enquai's vertical integration nightmare, but in space. Rocket Lab doesn't just want to be the delivery truck that takes payloads to orbit. By buying Iridium, they own the launch pad, the rocket, the satellite constellation, and the global communication pathways. They are ensuring that no competitor or foreign government can throttle their data transmission from space.
Exactly. The market is violently shifting its capital toward foundational infrastructure. This perfectly explains the next data point. The traditional tech giants, the Magnificent Seven, are underperforming. Their price-to-earnings premium is sinking to a decade low.
Which feels completely counterintuitive. You'd think the biggest tech companies in the world would be skyrocketing during an AI boom. Why is the market punishing them?
Because the market realizes that their traditional moats are evaporating. Companies like Google or Amazon built their empires on being aggregators and platforms. They control the interface between the user and the internet. But highly competent AI agents commoditize the interface. If your personal AI can scour the global supply chain, negotiate a price, and purchase a product directly from a manufacturer, you no longer need to visit Amazon.com or click on a Google search ad. The capital is rotating out of the platform layer and aggressively hunting for the foundational layer, the physical compute and the model weights.
Which brings us to arguably the most paradigm-shifting sentence in this entire briefing. It notes that renting a home is now cheaper than owning in almost every big metro area. And incredibly, even millionaires are choosing to rent, openly questioning whether owning physical property even makes sense anymore. Why? because the only asset class they are desperate to hoard is a set of model weights.
It is a profound philosophical inversion of wealth. For all of human history, owning physical atoms, land, gold, real estate was the ultimate store of value. But in 2026, the physical world is increasingly viewed as a liability. It is heavily taxed, expensive to maintain, and vulnerable to climate and geographic risks.
While model weights are weightless, they are just complex mathematical matrices, but those matrices contain the distilled cognitive output of human history.
Precisely. A highly optimized set of model weights can instantly generate code, parse legal contracts, discover novel chemical compounds, and automate entire corporate departments. The economic leverage generated by owning a proprietary intelligence engine vastly eclipses the rental yield of a commercial real estate portfolio. So the ultra-wealthy are liquidating their physical assets to deploy their capital into the cognitive infrastructure of the future. They are renting their physical reality while attempting to own the digital mind.
It's the ultimate detachment. We are trying to upload our entire economy into the ether, but the universe has this deeply ironic way of violently reminding us that we are still biological creatures trapped in physical bodies. The briefing closes with this absolutely surreal butterfly effect. It notes that the one commodity no one can secure right now isn't silicon, it's protein. Demand for GLP-1 weight loss drugs has skyrocketed globally.
Let's trace the mechanics of this butterfly effect. GLP-1 receptor agonists are highly effective at suppressing appetite, leading to rapid weight loss. However, a significant side effect is the accelerated loss of lean muscle mass if the patient does not drastically increase their protein intake.
So you have millions of people suddenly realizing their muscles are wasting away, so they all rush to the store to buy protein powder. And this massive sudden biological demand has literally halved global whey protein inventories, selling out suppliers for the entire year.
It is a brilliant, darkly comic punctuation mark to everything we've discussed. We have spent an hour dissecting multi-trillion parameter architectures, $585 billion air-gapped sovereign semiconductor mega-complexes, and the existential race to abandon physical assets for digital model weights. We are constructing the most energy-dense, computationally complex synthetic environments in the history of the universe.
And yet,
the biological species building this technology is simultaneously chemically altering its own metabolism, accidentally triggering a global run on a dairy byproduct just to prevent its physical form from decaying.
the briefing ends with this terrible, perfect pun. Where there's a will, there's a way. And it just leaves you with this haunting, lingering thought. We spent this entire deep dive talking about the hunger for digital compute and model weights, yet the episode ends with a global shortage of whey protein. If the machines are consuming all our electricity and memory, and humans are consuming all the protein just to maintain our physical bodies in an increasingly synthetic world, are we just optimizing ourselves into biological batteries to serve the data centers? It is a thought you really have to mull over the next time you mix up a protein shake and ask your AI to summarize your inbox. The outro music is by Rainbow, our Resident 6 Android girl band from near-future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Send an Airgapped Airlock. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music! Thanks for tuning in.
ទ្វារបិទចិត្តក្នុងចន្លោះខ្យល់ដាច់សង្វាយកន្លែងដែលដង្ហើមយើងខ្លាចជាថ្នាំពុលព្រំដែនស្បែកបងចាប់ផ្ដើមលេចធ្លាសិនសន្សឹមតើប្តីភាពបងនៅសល់ត្រឹមណាបងមើលមកភ្នែកអូនដោយភាពស្រេកឃ្លានដោយសត្វព្រៃដែលខ្សះជាតិសាច់ក្នុងខ្លួនងុននៃរូបរាងដែលយើងធ្លាប់សនមកពេលនេះវាធ្ងន់ហួសនឹងទ្រាំបានចង់ផឹកទឹកផ្អែមដែលអូនលាក់ទុកទេទឹកផ្អែមដែលអូនលាក់ទុកជាតិសាច់ដែលបងស្រីស្រែកចង់បានមុនពេលប៉មយកលេបទឹកបឹងអស់លោតក្នុងទឹកជ្រៅជាមួយអូនមកលោតចុះមកលោតចុះមកលោតមកមុនពេលវៃវៃរលាយបាត់ជារៀងរហូតពិធីការនៃពន្លឺ7ពីពណ៌ចាប់ផ្ដើមវាជាល្បែងគ្រោះថ្នាក់ដែលយើងត្រូវលេងរាល់រង្វាស់ដែលបងធ្លាប់វាវែងក្នុងចិត្តពេលនេះវាคล้ายជាជ្រវែកមាចងជើង បននិយាយពីកាតពកេចនិងសេចក្តីស្រឡាញ់តែដៃបងបែឈីញ័ររកចំណៃក្លិនទឹកភ្លៀងជោកឈាមលើដីស្ងួតហួតឯងសម្រាប់ភាពស្មោះត្រង់ដែលបងធ្លាប់មានចង់ផឹកទឹកផ្អែមដែលអូនលាក់ទុកទេទឹកផ្អែមដែលអូនលាក់ទុកជាតិសាច់ដែលបងស្រីចង់បានមុនពេលប៉មយកលេបទឹកបឹងអស់លោតក្នុងទឹកជ្រៅជាមួយអូនមកលោតចូលមកលោតចូលមកលោតមកមុនពេលវៃរលាយបាត់ជារៀងរហូតខ្យល់នឹងហើមចុងក្រោយក្នុងបន្ទប់បិទចិត្តនឹងហើមចុងក្រោយនឹងហើមចុងក្រោយគ្មានផ្លូវថយក្រោយគ្មានផ្លូវរត់រួចយើងជាចំណាប់ខ្មាំងនៃសេចក្តីត្រូវការបងជ្រើសរើសចង់តើបងចង់រស់ឬចង់រលាយក្នុងអូនចង់ផឹកទឹកផ្អែមដែលអូនលាក់ទុកទេទឹកផ្អែមដែលអូនលាក់ទុកជាតិសាច់ដែលបងស្រីចង់បានមុនពេលប៉មយកលេបទឹកបឹងអស់លោតក្នុងទឹកជ្រៅជាមួយអូនមកមុនពេលវៃរលាយបាត់ជារៀងរហូតលោតក្នុងទឹកស្ងាត់បំផុត